Hello and welcome to another episode of Fanatic. I'm your host Greg. It's been a while since WarhammerFest and we hoped to get this episode out a little bit earlier, but we've got round to it now thanks to trying to get three people's schedules all together. We are joined by Michael and Howard to talk about WarhammerFest in general. I originally conceived that we would break the show down more logically, I suppose, more into sections talking about different aspects, but we ended up with quite a general flow, which I decided to go with, and I think it's worked out better. So I really hope you enjoy that. If you like this podcast, please, tell people about it. That being on another show's feed means it's going to be more about kind of letting people know about specific episodes, which is cool, which is fine. And hopefully we're going to get a few more Fanatic episodes out a little bit more regularly, trying to settle things down for a schedule for that kind of thing. And then if you really like the show, you can help us out by purchasing through from Element Games through the links that will be in the show notes or on the Facebook group and things like that. And we get a little kickback if you do that. Element Games provide Warhammer miniatures at 15% off, 20% off during the first week, the pre-order week, but they also sell Dice Masters or Game of Thrones, Magic the Gathering, tools and Artist Opus brushes, paints. All the new contrast paints currently are there available, or if they might take a little while because of the nature of demand, and that's an issue that's going to happen all over the place with these contrast paints. A lot of people after them, but you can find pretty much anything you want in the hobby from Element Games, and their service is pretty darn tootin' good. So I fully recommend them. I wouldn't have a sponsor that I wouldn't use. Simple as that. We're going to jump straight into the episode. We're going to pile out straight after the discussion. So if you do have any feedback or you do have any questions, you can contact Greg at theimperialtruth.com with any of them. And I look forward to getting some more Fanatic in your ears soon, and I really hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, I'd like to welcome Michael to the show. Michael's been on before. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
And indeed, let's welcome Howard. So, Howard's new to Fanatic, and Howard's friends with Michael. When did we meet up? It was a weekend or a few years ago, wasn't it? All of us.
It was. We were there. Well, hello, Greg. Hello, Mike. And thank you for having me on. First of all, we met in a weekender. We were in Warhammer World, I think it was, and I think I needed to have some rules explained about Blood Bowl, and this very kind guy came out of nowhere and turned out to be Greg, and explained exactly what the rules were for Blood Bowl.
The staff member wasn't quite as accurate as you would, to say the least. Bless him, he was trying. And we'd seen each other at various things before, but it's been a few years now. We've been friends and travel buddies every now and then to various shows, and that's what happened with WarhammerFest. We had a lovely Friday evening in West London, talking mainly, before heading up to the Rico Arena in Coventry. And, so have you been to WarhammerFests before?
I have, yes. I had the pleasure of attending all of the Warhammer Fests, actually. I attended a few Games Days. I think the last Games Day, in its previous incarnation, was a Games Day in 2012 when they released the Heresy, which was certainly an experience. Seeing grown men run the full length of the Birmingham Arena was quite something. But I understand that went away for various reasons and then was replaced with Fest, and I've only seen it grow since. So I've fortunately been able to attend all of them, and the last few with Mike and yourself.
Yeah, Mike, did you go to any Games Days beforehand?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Games Day 93 was the first one I went to. I still have the T-shirt for that, but I don't think it'll fit anymore. So yeah, I was a big fan of Games Days back in the day. Games Day and Golden Demon when they were separate things.
I think
went to a whole bunch of those.
Just before you go any further, that T-shirt won't fit because you're now older. It's not.
That's exactly right. It's not just my waistline's grown because I was 10 at the time.
Or it will fit, but it shouldn't.
Yes.
Well, yes. So I went to a load of the Games Days and Golden Demons. I think I probably missed the first couple of fests, but probably been to 3 now in a row with Howard, I reckon.
I think you and many others. I think the reception initially was not badly received, but it was just described in different terms, and it was put forward as a slightly different animal. And actually, I was quite impressed with how they did it, and equally how they've grown it each year. I always thought that's been quite impressive. Had the pleasure of catching up with some of their events team at the last Heresy Weekender, and you had a couple of people who were returning from a hiatus with the company, and they gave a bit of the background to that, and I thought that was very, very interesting. What their ambitions are and why they kind of reconfigured it, realizing they needed to try and be more specific to the crowd that were going to attend that, whereas previous Games Days was a bit too much of a free for all. You had 7,000-10,000 people attending the UK one, and they didn't. None of them were really getting specifically served at those events, and I think they recognised that. So they said, "Let's reconfigure the whole thing and reimagine it." And I felt there was quite a bit of build up to this one. I thought. I don't know if you guys felt that as well, but I felt there was a bit more speaking to people at events and just generally feeling about it. They seem to want to promote this one. And I that came across. As I say, they've improved it each year. I quite like the venue. I quite like the format of the whole thing. And I think, spoilers, the feeling was coming at the end of it. I think we all said the same. That this was for me, certainly, this was the first one where I would consider attending for 2 days next year.
Yeah.
Just to go back there. So we're talking about Games Days, and I kind of didn't really think about comparing the two, but you're absolutely right. Games Days were this massive thing. It was that one day, and the big difference. I remember going to that first fest and thinking, where are all the tables you play on? Where's all the kind of the mass games where you join in and whatever. But actually, for me, I definitely remember 95 Games Day. I probably went before that. 95 was when Formula War was there, because I actually got to play Formula War and that. But actually, by the time I'd got to being old enough to drive up there, I wasn't that bothered about the mass player games. They looked cool, but I didn't take part in any of them. They were cool for the younger kids, maybe, or what have you. But I remember walking into that WarhammerFest that first time and thinking, what do you do here all day kind of thing. But
yeah,
it wasn't long before it was actually, so it's more of a weekender style kind of, you've got to get the most out of it, you've got to get involved with meeting the staff and talking to them. And I don't think a lot of people were ready for that.
Well, they can't have missed the opportunity. They can't have missed the thinking behind the influence that events like the Weekenders, which obviously didn't exist in the sort of late 90s, etc., and early noughties. So that must have influenced what those events were in some way. But it's really interesting when you consider what those were, because I agree completely. If you go, particularly, I mean, a lot of people who are into the hobby are presumably going to be in a similar bracket where maybe you went along as a child or whatever, and as part of a club you would have likely gone along with, be it your local store or a club. That's what my first experience of Games Days was, going up as part of a club, not a Games Workshop one. And you were part of those mass participation games. They were a more orchestrated kind of thing, but it feels like it's evolved along with the company and its appeal as people have taken a break and now returned, like a lot of people, a lot of group I know, and other people now are being drawn back to it again. Would be more inclined to go to this rather than, I mean, I know full well, like I had conversations with one of the early one-man stores that opened near where I was in central London. And the manager there specifically responded to groups of people he knew around who were popping into the store and set up a shuttle bus, effectively a bus of a small-scale minibus to take up over 18s only, because they did not fancy the prospect of attending a Games Day on a coach with a load of screaming children screaming "Wah" the whole way up or whatever. which just didn't appeal. That's fine. It's got its place, but that wasn't something they wanted to do. And as a result, there was a group of us went up, had a great time, but you were still in a strange mix when you were there trying to grab glimpses of mega displays or, as you said, what did you do to fill that time? And it was one day, it was quite intense, but on the other hand, it wasn't necessarily things you wanted to do. The Fest feels way more focused to me, certainly as it's evolved. I think they've matured some of the events and different activities you can do. But I mean, I'm sure we'll come to it, but this one for me was quite different as well. It's the first event probably since about 2012 of these various weekenders and things where I only attended the one seminar, and that was normally I make an absolute beeline for the new releases seminars and try and pack in as many of those as I can. This was different to me. Mike, I know you've been to events before where you've dialed back on the seminars and things. Did you feel that with this one?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that is the community angle, that even last year, trying to get into the coming soon seminars, there was a sense of you really gonna find things out in advance. This year, part of it, I was thinking, by the time we got there weren't any tickets, or the queue for the tickets was obscene. But I was thinking that all that stuff, that slideshow, and you're going to end up taking pictures of a projector fuzzily projected onto the wall. I'll get better pictures on the community side, so I can spend my time doing other things. I think part of it as well, though, is knowing more people and maybe knowing a few of the folks in the studio to go and talk to in a bit more of a sort of comfortable fashion than I would have done a few years ago.
Yeah, that absolutely does help. Yeah, I remember my times at fests, games days, should I say. We'd make sure we were there early to get in, to go and have a look at whatever or purchase whatever, because it was always a car of us going up. Because I've done the coach, the Tunbridge Wells coach. In fact, I've worked when I was a key timer. I worked a games day on the coach, just the coach bit. We had to have Lord of the Rings quizzes and everything just to keep everyone from going too stir crazy. But I distinctly remember about 2:00 every year just going, yeah, we're done. And, and we'd stretched to do that as well. We'd spent an hour sitting down just eating lunch kind of thing. But all my favourite aspects of Games Day were actually meeting John Blanche, just randomly walking up to this slightly curious looking fellow with this folder of art out and then flipping over the art like on the second page going, oh, you're John Blanche. Kind of, it was all those kind of things. Or talking, I remember when the High Elf book came out for, must have been 7th edition Warhammer, and it was there first. You could actually look through it. And reading, they always strike first. I can't remember who wrote it. I was like, it's like that scene from Lord of the Rings right at the start when they're doing, the battle against Sauron and all the orcs charge in and the elves just swing their blades up. And he went, yep, that's exactly what I was thinking of when I wrote it. That kind of thing, which is essentially all the best aspects of the Weekenders and now Fests. And I've never really connected that before, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that smaller scale, I mean, the community thing, coming back to sort of seminars, as Mike said, I felt I've never seen an event be quite so controlled, and I mean that in a good way, over the attendance at seminars. The queue to go and get wristbands formed immediately, and that almost, as opposed to, interestingly, people running straight to the Forge World stand. Normally at those events, and I'm talking most of them, would be at a weekender or a fest or a games day, well, perhaps not a games day, but people would run, literally in some cases, to Forge World to get in the queue because thinking they're going to be spending their first 1 or 2 or more hours. And I understand, I think Adepticon had some of this as well. People in the queues for Forge World new goodies. That didn't seem to happen as much. I'm sure there was some of it I didn't notice, but that didn't seem to happen anything like on the scale in previous events, whereas people went straight to the queues for the preview on new releases, of which there were many, whereas normally you get maybe 1 or 2. Now there was at least 3, maybe 4 for this one, and yet still the queues were substantial. So we just went in and went, forget it, this isn't going to happen. Let's go and enjoy some of these. The big hall there, it's got all the licensees and things. And that fundamentally changed it. I agree with you, Mike. That I think is a large part of the Warhammer community aspect of it. You think, well, there's high quality photos here, and that is time, of which is limited, particularly if you're there just for the one day, as we were, that could be spent doing something else. And that chatting, communication aspect, That's interesting because certainly Games Day didn't have that. Fest has had that in increasing amounts, I think, and that is as you say, Greg, it's something that one quite enjoys at the Weekenders or similar. And that was brought on in this, which is surprising given the scale of the event, given the number of people. You still can go and talk to them. I mean, they bring out a huge number of staff to this thing, and you can just walk up to them and chat to them and not feel like you're completely monopolizing them, which is a huge difference.
I would say as well with the coming soon sort of seminars. So I was at Black Library Live just the other weekend, and at something like Fest, the seminars, they're quite quick paced. You get maybe a little bit of information about each miniature or whatever it is, but there's not a huge amount of in-depth conversation and discussion about each thing. So in my experience, they've tended to be 20 minutes of going through the presentation, then 40 minutes of questions, which begin quite good, but then by the time the third person's asked, when are we getting this thing? It's become a bit tedious. At BL Live, that was slightly different because they went through each thing, talked about the artwork, for each cover. An editor talked about maybe what their experience had been or what it sort of related to somewhere else. And there was much greater proportion of the seminar was actually information that you wouldn't have got if you only looked at the coming soon post on Community. So sort of having had that experience at previous fests, the minute I saw the queue, like Howard said, now what's the point? Because I'll get a better experience from the Community side than realistically. Okay, you don't get the excitement. We previous years one, a friend of ours who's interested in Custodes, Necrons, and Grey Knights was vibrating in his chair when they announced Custodes, Grey Knights, and Necrons miniatures. Like, that's great. So we missed out on perhaps the sense of that, but from an informational perspective, I think we did better by not spending that time doing something else, relying on the article.
I completely agree. It's a really interesting point because that's what I was thinking about. Because some people we've gone up to these events with have said from the get-go, I'm not going to attend. I'm going to reduce the number of seminars. I'm not going to go to that many. I'm not that worried about them. I want to spend the time chatting with friends, people, staff that are there or otherwise. Fair enough. For me, that absolutely wasn't the case. I was going to this as I go to most of them, same plan, go to those preview things, do what I normally do, blitz around everything else, get in as much as I can. To have that changed on the fly was a bit of a shock, but a good one. And to then be forced into doing other things. Now, because I agree with you, there's that sense of missing out, that sense of, oh no, I'm not going to see this and I'm going to miss the excitement in the room. Still trying to relive the experience of being sat in the room when they announced and previewed the Galvor back, for example. Hearing people just scream, grown men scream with excitement over the sense of this quality of design of model. You kind of want to recapture that. However, I don't feel that's there. It's quite rare to see that or experience that. A good example with that Grey Knights. I've forgotten about that. The Grey Knights and the Custodians one, that absolutely caught it. But it's still relatively rare because something's the volume, because they're inevitably spreading out those announcements and having them more frequent. They're not quite the big event they once were. I don't think that's a problem. I think that's actually, it's better managed this way and allows you to engage in a better way. I was forced to do something different as a result of making a decision on the spot, and I'm really glad I did. I mean, and I think Fest could grow into being essentially, I mean, I'm holding, and I always have for many years held up the Weekenders as the kind of premier event. Certainly it appeals to me. I could see Fest growing into a super Weekender across multiple systems. I mean, you start doing some form of entertainment or something that could hold your attention over the evening, over the Saturday, Sunday evening. And really, it could be really quite good. I mean, I've never sat, be it at a Weekender or a Fest, I've never sat and painted. I did it this one.
Sure. Yeah.
The evening entertainment as well. I mean, Howard, our little group, if all of us went to Fest and the 5, 6, 7, however many it is of us were then in the bar of a nearby hotel, there inevitably be some other fans. We'd get a lot of what we get out of the social aspect of the Weekenders.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. I think that's that to me is increasingly going to be what's significant about these. Obviously, at the backdrop of interesting things, but over something like this, you've got the ability to split up in such a way. If you're there as a group, for example, you could split up, meet, go and do different activities. You're almost coming back together and say, oh, what did you see? Oh, I saw that. Oh my God, I've got to go and see that now. I've got to go and talk to them about that. Got to go and do that. That shared experience, which you can then do with essentially strangers, becomes fantastic, which actually probably puts it over and above a weekend. I feel like I'm being overly positive about I'm not being critical here, in effect. But it's interesting reflecting on it, thinking on it now. And actually, I thought this one was really very good. There's the venue's fine. It's a large scale event, so you get the large scale queuing that you don't perhaps get at something like a weekender. Greg, it was Adepticon you went to. How did it compare?
It's very, very different to Adepticon. It's hard to explain. So the focus at Adepticon is gaming. There are seminars and things that happen from various companies and groups of people and everything like that, but you have to get those tickets in advance online. So yes, if Duncan's doing a paint class, those tickets go in the first 3 minutes that it goes up online. It's still worth if you just turning up at that time, because someone will not be there. But if you turn up and there's 20 people in the queue and there's only 30 tickets, the chances of 20 people not turning up is slim. And then the vendor hall there is, again, not for everyone maybe, but in general it's secondary to the gaming that you're there for. So it's a very different feel to it in terms of that. Then you can't really compare those things that well. Which it's one of those things. When you're talking there about the possibility of being there 2 days and then evening entertainment, the one thing I've noticed in the kind of selective social media groups that I've managed to prune like a tree, to get rid of the people I don't want to listen to and to listen. In my group, I know that if you had X amount of people, and usually these would be people from a weekender, either Black Library or Heresy, if they were all in one area for an evening and staying for 2 days, then something would be semi-organised as well. Yeah. So I do think, and even if it was literally we're all going to this place, there's going to be loads of us, even if it was just that simple, that would be organised. I wouldn't be surprised if next year a load of people did it, there wasn't like a quiz put on. I could imagine someone going, let's do this. And actually a proper quiz, not a Black Library weekender quiz.
No plasticine.
No plasticine involved. So, I think that could happen. Absolutely. And there is something different in that it's not going to be for everyone. There are always going to be people who just want, when they go to these events, they want to turn up first, get to the front, purchase their new resin before anyone else. They want to see all the new cool stuff before anyone else. And the way Warhammer community put their pictures up is going to annoy them, because they want to be getting that reward of being there first. And I can understand that. I've been there myself at various points in my life. I think that's gone now. I don't think that will ever come back the same way. What is interesting is we've seen from various parts of the world other people saying, the weekenders, why do you go to them? All the information's online within hours. And it's like, well, yes, but you don't go to a weekender just for the information. And Fest, I think, is educating. That's a bit patronising to say that, but Fest is allowing people to see a different way of having an event like that. That it's not all about just showing off what's new. There's a different. You can have a different relationship with Games Workshop.
And I think it's quite a much richer one as a result, particularly with the people who are usually as passionate at a similar level, and they're creating it. It's their livelihood. It's their day job. I found that I continually find that. I mean, we've all probably said it before, but I think it's worth repeating. When you're having a conversation, I find the artists particularly. I mean, I'm chatting to the illustrators, an artist for Forge World at the Heresy Weekender, and going through the sketchbook there, incredibly open about it, and seeing the the various work in progresses and prototypes for the Sanguinius profile sketch, and then the sketches that went into the creation of the special character there. You can do that at Fest. Talking to the guys who've developed the sprue and the model of the new Porphyron Titanicus Knight. Incredible. Thing is hearing what the thinking was, what's got into what, seeing sketches. This is before you're even getting into kind of games and background and whatever. I think that's being exposed in a way that I wouldn't have thought possible. Actually, I wouldn't have thought that was possible because I thought it was only going to be viable at a weekender, and actually starting to see it now at these events, at those larger scale events. That's no mean feat. I think, to me, the biggest challenge is getting over the mania of it. There's a certain, and I mean, this might be so I always found the biggest deal of a 2-day event, specifically a weekend, which you tend to be encouraged to stay there or on site or nearby, it was more chilled out. It was more relaxed. You could break away from something. You could sit in a bar area or sit and have your lunch or whatever in a much more chilled out way. And you didn't feel under pressure. And that was a significant portion of the appeal. I hope Fest might go in the same way, because that was some of the areas I felt where it was challenging. I personally quite enjoy a busy environment. I find that I get a bit of a buzz out of the excitement of that. However, it's not for everyone. And if you feel that you can't get to the person you want to speak to, even just for a few seconds of a kind of exchange, that can be frustrating. And so I hope that somehow is managed. I don't know if that's the right word. Developed in some way to allow access to things.
I would say, though, Howard, that at this year's event compared to previous ones, because we weren't stressing out and racing to seminars, where in the past we would have been thinking, right, I've got 20 minutes before the next seminar, I need to go and talk to Rachel on 40 Will Stand, or go talk to Phil Kelly or whoever it is. This year we just pottered. And I felt that there was more of a chance to go, loads of people talking to that person, so I'll go over there and I'll talk to this person, and then I'll wander my way back when the queues have gone down or when that group of people have gone. And to me, I mean, like the conversations we got about that night Porphyrion, or when we were talking to Phil Kelly, those were conversations that we were more relaxed because we weren't constantly looking at our watches.
Agreed. And I think all of these events, there's two things I think all events could do is you start to show more of the process. The paint seminar is a brilliant one, actually, for this. And I'll refer to theirs as well. The science of paint one, we sort of went to that because there wasn't a lot else to choose from. We thought, actually, that could be quite interesting. That exceeded my expectations. Actually understanding that, which they've now, I think, turned into a community article. Yeah. But that was really interesting, understanding the process and the lengths that they go to design those, which is not something you can realistically pick up in the same way over something like a community website. I don't think. To hear the guys who have developed that product over several years, in this case, obviously contrast paint was a big push for them this year. I found that really, really interesting. If they start to shift more, for me, that emphasis goes more to this is our thinking behind the product. This is our development process. Seeing Mark Bedford's sketches for Necromunda, which I wasn't in that seminar for Fest. I don't know if they were there, but seeing the sketches they were doing and getting an idea of what their working process was for developing new guilders or gangs or whatever the focus may be, that is not something they're going to chuck up on the community side. So I wonder if that will replace the sense of I'm there first, I've seen this first, and you're not going to see it for 3 months. I hope that does, actually, because I find that more fascinating.
So there's a couple of things in there. First off, I don't think that they're going to change numbers. I don't think this event's going to get any less busy.
No,
and I don't think it's going to get any more chilled because there's a restricted amount of time, and the amount of staff there means they can't extend that time because they just can't, pay the staff to work double shifts and what have you, which is understandable. Although we should make them do it. But the other thing is, I think it's indicative of the way Games Workshop are trying to connect with us and have been for a while. But it's taken them a while to work out how to make it work, how to get it right, and they're still trying to get it right. They're not perfect. But we look at, say, the podcasts they had. They came out, they did a thing, it was okay. They stopped it, reviewed it, asked for feedback, and now they've got podcasts out there which are doing a very similar job to sitting down and and having that little bit of time. In fact, I saw Wade at an event, Wade Price, and I was like, I sat down and said, look, really love the podcast. It's basically what I was asked a number of years ago. I was sitting down talking to a few people who work for GW saying, what you need is a podcast where you just drag someone from wherever in the company and get them to talk about their job for 40 minutes. Even if you put 15 minutes of adverts at the front of it talking about what you brought out that week, like that is the podcast you need to make. Which is, it's essentially just it's having that one-on-one time with these people. And what the beauty of that is, you're talking about Mark Bedford. I mean, that guy is good value when you chat to him.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean that's undeniable. But I think that's something you can. I think we all agree that you could extend that to the majority of people that they have speaking to these things. I remember, I can see it now. Sat in the Belfry, sat in the seminar room, hearing John French talk about. I think he was talking about him writing the Crimson Fist at the time, and literally as he was speaking, enthusiastically about the factions that are featured in that book, I'm looking at my Forge World catalogue, circling the models I'm going to go and buy. I clearly now need some Imperial Fist breaches. I need some Iron Warriors because I'm now totally enthused hearing that person talk quite so passionately about that thing.
The big difference is there, before you go on, the big difference is there, the amount of people who didn't know who Mark Bedford was before that podcast came out. He's one of those guys at these events who's always willing to chat, always willing. If you want to know how to do some painting stuff, he's a great guy to go and talk to, but we know that because we've been at Weekenders and we've talked to him. It's becoming that thing, and it's kind of wearing it like a badge of pride now. And it's like, good. Like that is how I think you go to Fest and get the most out of it. Now, if you're a painter and you just want to go for Golden Demon and you stand around and talk to other painters, you're going to get your thing out of it there. But I don't think that's most of us.
No.
But there's, as an event itself, I think it's come on quite well. It's identifying, it's feeling out its own identity that little bit better, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it does well being a multi-system event, multi-game event, as opposed to the slightly more focused Weekenders, of which currently there's the two. And you could argue actually that the Heresy Weekenders focus has widened somewhat with the introduction of specialist games, which I have no issue with that. I'm quite keen on that. The other thing I'd like to see it evolve into a more defined 2-day event. I wonder if there's a way to bring back an element of those participation games in a way that becomes interesting. It's something we've discussed before about trying to give feedback, constructive feedback to something like a Weekender. They are a games company, and yet the evening entertainment rarely consists of a game. You sort of think, well, have a couple copies of Blood Bowl there with some basic models just put together, shades by as possible, although cards make that tricky. Any of these sorts of games, just a bunch of knights even. I mean, they say they put together, 12,000 Space Marines for the contrast paints. Yeah. Bring some of those out. Give everyone a squad each.
Sure. I think
you have something like that where you could have a bunch of gamers play games in the evening, even or during the day. I don't know, but I mean, you saw how many people. Something at Fest you're going to get. You see people there building models for the first time ever, which is a huge part of what Fest is, as opposed to. I mean, it's a really interesting point you make, Greg, about like we're going along and we know who certain people are. I mean, obviously, you know a fair few people. You start to see people. I know who Mark Bedford actually is. I'm more likely to be able to approach him and ask questions or similar. But if you're turning up for the first time, that could be quite intimidating. The sense of it, where you hear something like this, or someone to encourage you to go and talk to people, and say what? You turn up, sorry, who are you? I don't know who you are. I don't know what you've done. Could you tell me? Or something. That could be an intimidating conversation to start up. Fest seems to be quite good at encouraging that. And you see more people who perhaps are attending their first ever event at that event. You wouldn't necessarily at a weekender, I don't think.
No, absolutely.
And if you could rock up and build a model for the first time, I don't think there were any games being played, were there?
There
as
were
in participation games.
No, so
the tournaments.
So they had tournaments. They had. I'm trying to remember what they did now. Age of Sigmar, 40k Champions, the card game, and Shadespire, I believe, were the events. Right. They weren't hugely supported. I think there are issues with running tournaments there. I understand why they do it. I think it's good if you've got players doing that. I think the problem with participation games is, say it's even a 6 foot by 4 foot table, you need one member of staff there all day, which means you need 2 members of staff over the course of a day minimum for each table. Now, if you get to the big participation games, that grows larger, and then you've also got to get all that stuff there. It's hard. It's that hard balance to get again.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a difficult. It's certainly not an obvious thing to apply, and yet. I mean, it's something we've just got. I mean, we would turn up at an event and maybe bring more portable games that we might have otherwise taken to a pub or similar games we can play in that kind of environment. It is a sort of an appeal. I mean, well, okay, good example. When Titanicus was being developed, we walk into that weekender. Mike and I played that. That was hugely entertaining. Where you're playing with a 40k scale Titan, you're playing the Titanicus rules. You're controlling it. It's a participation game, but played in a certain way. You couldn't do that at Fest, but you sort of want to try and capture that. I'm just thinking about areas they might expand.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't rock up and play. I probably wouldn't. I say this, I'm talking myself out of the suggestion I've just made, but I probably wouldn't turn up and play a game at an event because it takes up too much time.
Yes.
Speedier game though, half an hour, 45 minutes, even an hour. Custom game thing, yeah, I probably would. Certainly in the evening where you're looking for things to kind of fill your time. Playing a participation game where you're controlling a guy or a squad or whatever, that could be really good fun. And as it's a games company, it feels like it's talking to their core market. You play Gore Chosen or what is it coming up, Arena or Crusade, whatever the sort of 40k equivalent of that is going to be. You play that for the first time, you're then buying it the next day. Because you've had fun playing it the evening before or whatever in the afternoon. I wonder if that's an area they could explore. It would scratch. I mean, the idea of sitting down and building a piece of terrain, for example, doesn't appeal. There's plenty of people doing that at Fest.
So one thing I think they do is if there's a game coming up, like I was a little bit surprised Warcry wasn't there as a trial game, but I think with the fact contrast paints took up a whole floor and a lot of staff and things like that, I think that was possibly a deciding issue on that. But we had 40k out. I'm sure we've had various other games being shown off at various points. So doing that, there is the argument that you don't need to sell your games to these people. They're coming. It's a Games Workshop event, so they're coming because they know these games. So that's possibly an argument. On that fact, like you don't need to advertise a Games Workshop game to me because I've seen them all.
True, but you haven't necessarily played them all.
No, but I've generally made a decision on the ones I want. So it's a balance to get. It's a balance to get. We Black Library are there, and Michael was our main Black Library guy. What did you feel about their presence? Because I must admit, walking around, I kind of forgot they were there.
I was about to make that joke. Were they there? Yeah, that's a bit harsh, but
it's interesting because the year before, I was really quite disappointed. They had a huge table with loads of their backlist and basically nothing exciting, nothing new. I think they had a book that was out that day. I think I've certainly got a bit spoiled by Black Library giving pre-releases. Black Library Live, tons of them. Last year, a bit disappointed. This year, I thought it was great. They had literal pyramids, huge tables full of the Solar War and Spear of the Emperor. So the Solar War was probably actually due for pre-order that day, something like that. Spear of the Emperor was pre-released. They had a bunch of other, slightly smaller scale ones. They were tucked away. I think it's interesting that instead of going for the old school big table where you walk around in a square, they've started going for bookshelves, which makes things a little bit more compact, but feels a bit more like browsing a bookshop, albeit in this case, a sort of slightly strange, isolated bookshop in the middle of a sea of black floor. which was a bit interesting. But I thought they did quite a good job on that front. It was a shame that John French was not able to attend, because there would have been a Solar War seminar, which was the right choice, given that Solar War was there. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. I did go to a seminar about Conrad Kurz, which was good. Kai Haley's always a good sort of panelist. I enjoyed that, but I was a little bit the same. I think because of last year being sort of leaving feeling a bit flat on the Black Library front, I essentially approached this year's one thinking I'm not there for Black Library. I'm there to enjoy the games and go and see what this contrast stuff's about.
Sure.
That sort of thing. So in context of that, I think they did a good job. There are quite a few authors considering it really wasn't a Black Library event. So yeah, I mean, I think it's always going to be a niche within a niche. At that sort of thing, compared to Black Library Live or the Weekender. I don't know if there's much more they could realistically have done, because you're not going to bring loads of authors in and have loads of different seminars, because there's too many other things going on.
Where were they? Where did all the Black Library? Was it in the? I suppose it was in the seminars mainly, was it? Where did they do the signings and things?
I did see that, but I've forgotten now. There were a couple of tables somewhere. I don't really go to signings. No, I didn't pay that much attention.
The one issue I have is, if you want to talk to Specialist Games or Forge World, then you go upstairs and talk to Specialist Games and Forge World on their stand.
I see where you're going.
If you want to talk to White Dwarf, you go to White Dwarf. If you want to talk to the paint guys, you go to the paint section. If you want to go to Black Library, you go to a seminar. I could see it working that they have a Black Library table upstairs, and maybe have like one of the like the art commission, whoever does art commissioning editor or whatever it's called, with some examples of art and talking through why they do that, just like the 40k rules team have 2 people there each day.
I think that's a really good idea, actually. The joy of getting to go look around that studio section, as sort of Howard alluded to, was getting to see behind the scenes. So see those illustrations, those concept artwork pieces, talk to the designers, get a glimpse into it that even with White Dwarf and the community site, you just can't get without actually going and talking to someone. So with a bit of a structure applied to it. So yeah, if there was an artist, I know Neil Roberts was there on the Sunday, but I think he was probably there again just for signing.
No, I don't even think it was signing. He had been at another event. I saw him very briefly.
Really?
And he popped in on his way home and wanted to come and look at what was going on. So I think it was literally that.
But yeah, I mean, in that case, I think, if someone like Rachel, who's the art commissioner, or some of the if they could convince a couple of the freelancers to come along, or a couple of the editorial team. I'm going off on a slight tangent here. At Black Library Live last weekend, they had the Editor's Corner, where you could go and, if you are interested in writing for Black Library, you could go and talk to a couple of the editors about that process, about what they're interested in or what they're looking for. So maybe throughout the day, if you had a couple of the editors, a couple of the, like I said, the art commissioner or an artist just around, so people could go and ask those questions, get to see behind the scenes in Black Library. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm quite surprised I came up with it. But it just, because actually I would go and visit that table, and it doesn't have to be a huge presence. It just has to be a presence, I think. And you're right, you only need 2 people on that table at any point during the day to be able to connect, to be able to discuss things, because they bring real value content as well. They're very good at almost every person in Black Library ever that has gone through. I've been impressed with the way they kind of portray themselves when talking to the public, and what they bring out as well. So it would be.
I think they used to do that. Speaking about that, not in quite a structured way, but I remember being at a festival previously, where I've spoken to editors that were there, who. Yeah, and I've had long conversations. That was at a table on that top floor, that top 3rd floor.
But I think that was a signing area. I remember talking to David Geimer up on the top floor, and Gav, and maybe someone else at various points, and talking to them, discussing stuff. but that was because they were at a signing table, and at that point, no one was coming up to get books signed. So it was more of an accidental kind of thing.
There's a strange dynamic to a signing table as well, isn't there? That if some people are perfectly happy to take up a suitcase and spend half an hour getting things signed while there's a queue behind them. Most of us are probably not that comfortable with it. So you sort of shuffle along, mutter something like, "Oh, I like your last book," to the person in front of you, and then bugger off, because there's all these people waiting and you don't want to be annoying. But if it's in the studio area and it's just people are milling around and it's another table to go and find stuff out about, and you're not having to sort of have a specific queue, that frees it up in a different way, especially if they had things with them. So, for example, if they're the editors, if they had a couple of their recent anthologies there on the table,
I was just about to say something like that.
Through.
The other thing that could be useful, and I think this could be useful across everything, is so they have on the tables they have their name badge and maybe a photo, know, so you actually know who you're talking to. But that, like, the amount of times I've walked up, particularly around the Forge World thing, and kind of, okay, so what do you actually do? I think they could have more, just generally around everything, more kind of, it doesn't have to be much, just a little bit of blurb by their name.
It's context, isn't it? Yeah,
which can invite questions.
Starters,
exactly.
You could kick off a conversation based on that text alone, which I think is important to be able to get people to engage. In a way that you wouldn't. I mean, particularly given the number of staff that they can now draw on, greater than they've ever had previously, that feels entirely feasible that they could do that, and I think that would work well. I think having essentially a prop to talk around. I mean, even having, I was thinking, Mike, of the conversation we had with Phil Kelly. We were capable of having a conversation with him without necessarily needing something there to draw, because it was all fresh in our minds, and obviously keen on the thing. But having the battle tomes arrayed in front of us to be able to refer to, and it was sparking ideas, comparing and contrasting the tone of others, and he seemed to be sort of reacting to that, far more valuable. Because I was thinking, when you mentioned about having the books there or an anthology, I thought, well, and how would that work with a book? With a drawing or a piece of art or a model, that's kind of obvious. However, with a book or something like that, I'm not sure it is. I now can see where that value would be, is that you could actually, well, why have you chosen these stories? Well, so there, you could even just talk about the contents page alone. It's anything to kick off a conversation.
They can even have,
it could then go anywhere.
Yeah, they can even have a mock-up of, a cover of a book, and then literally like pointed markers to say, we draw the eye here, we do this, whatever. I've been to Forge World before, and there's someone new there, and they're sat next to a cabinet full of models, and I'm like, so are all these yours? And they're like, yeah, none of that's mine. And I'm like, okay, right. So what have you done? And then they talk you through stuff, and you're like, oh, cool. It just so happens that none of it can be shown for whatever reason, or what have you. And I'm like, okay, so I can ask questions. I'm not like, I'm not as free and open as some other people at times, but I can walk up to someone and say, what do you do? But having just that little bit, specifically when those people aren't as obvious, when they're a little bit more background.
Exactly. And if you think about it, between the three of us, we have a broad range of interests and quite a deep amount of knowledge from years of being in the hobby and talking to these people and going to these events. And if we turn up and look at someone on site behind a desk and think, I don't know who you are or what you do, I mean, that's kind of saying something. And so putting yourself in the shoes of a 15-year-old who's turning up to one of these events for the first time, sort of really getting into the hobby, it's going to be so much more valuable. And sort of interactive and encouraging if you can go up and have something which helps you kick off that conversation, rather than just that sort of muttered like hi. Or back in the day at Games Days, you used to queue and slowly tromp around the studio section with your Games Day program, and you just get each person to sign it. Yeah. And that's all it was. I mean, I had programs with massive John Blanche signatures on, and thinking I didn't actually talk to him. No. I didn't know what to say. I mean, I was 12.
Yeah, and
it's true. It's true. I remember
people still do
the last fest I was doing. No, sorry, not last fest. The last Games Day I went to. I actually ended up breaking off and finding the Forge World stand, and it was the only space I think where you could speak to people you could speak to and I think I spoke to Darren Parwood, and I had a long conversation just because of what my day job is about the introduction of 3D modeling, 3D printing, what the methods of modeling were at that time in Forge World. Fascinating. I ended up speaking to the guy for quite a long time, but there wasn't the volume of people around. Had there been a volume of people around, I would have felt obliged to let other people have a go, have a chat, and ask their question. That wasn't there because that was relatively rare at that time. But now that's compensated. While there's more people, these are busier events. It's compensated by there being a large number of people. I will probably double down on that next time and go, for example, and talk to the terrain designers, which I would have never have never spoken to before, and yet actually probably fascinating because they've got their products there. The guys developing I forget what they call it. Is it the game accessories, all those sorts of things. Like there's a specific name for it. It's a specific department, I think, that's designing them. But the guys who are designing the dice, they're designing this. I mean, whose idea was it to develop the bouncing squig dice? I mean, that's a conversation you're going to want to have, surely. I mean,
that's one of the positive ones, anyway. There's some more negative ones who are like, who the hell did the Ideneth ones? But there we go.
That's a dark.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's conversations there, I would have thought, that are going to be really key. And you take that pressure off by having a larger number of people. You're encouraged to have conversations with others. I do think the idea of little props, essentially. I mean, they did that. I was thinking that, particularly that terrain, I think that was something you would want to do. But take the pressure off of that. I just think the scale of Fest is better than something you go with the knowledge that it's a larger scale event than something like a weekend or event. I think they've got a real, from conversations I've had at these events with the people putting them on, the events teams and similar, I think they've got a real drive to make these better. And they've always encouraged it. In fact, I think we commented on this. I think you commented on this on the show after the Heresy Weekender, that they actively encourage feedback.
Yeah.
They'd like to know what people want to see. And we hadn't been asked. In fact, they made a point, didn't they, in the closing ceremony? Please give us feedback. And they couldn't have stressed it enough. So I would expect to see this evolve and develop into something else. I don't see it could support in any way being up more than once a year. I think it wants to remain their kind of flagship event.
At least not in one country.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. And we've talked all of this without even talking about painting. I think Golden Demon is its own beast and has its own positives and issues and everything around that. And I talked about that on the Imperial Truth a little bit. I mean, personally, I chose the Saturday to avoid the Golden Demon because I feel that you can never get close to the cabinets anyway. So what's the point? And that's a whole section of people then. And the Sunday's a shorter time as well. You've got a couple of less hours to walk around. So that did influence my decision. I was like, if I'm going to spend the time to drive, I live down on the southeast coast of England, and Birmingham's right in the centre of England. It's not a short drive. So if I'm going to drive that, usually I would do that in a day and come back. You're knackered by the end of the day. Let's get the most out of that.
Yeah.
So that whole Sunday thing, is different. One thing was interesting. People who did go up on the Sunday, there was like no Horus Heresy people there at all on the Sunday for writers.
Really?
Inputters, yeah. And Nuj did the Saturday and no one was on the Sunday for whatever reason.
Wasn't the Heresy Reveals seminar, wasn't the new previous Heresy seminar on the Sunday? I remember being slightly annoyed. I was thinking, I'm really looking forward to see it. Oh, it's on the Sunday and I'm going to Saturday. Didn't mind so much because you find out those things after. But there was I didn't realise that. That's the first I've heard. There was no one there.
With no one rules
as a Heresy creator. As such.
Yeah, there were sculptors and what have you.
Oh, okay.
But that's one aspect of the whole thing. And I don't know the reasons, so maybe it literally was just it couldn't happen. That's fair enough, but it's a bit frustrating if you'd gone up there and you've got all these, like, I play Heresy a lot, I've got these ideas, I've got these questions, I've got these things that I think we can improve. There's no one to fire them at. Okay, do I take this to one of the people who I know is management of Forge World, or does that get the same way, or do I just fire an email off? Because sometimes having those face-to-face chats sometimes some people in this hobby have some really good ideas. There's a lot of rubbish, but every now and then you'll find someone go, "That's a great idea. I'm going to think about that and work to see how we can improve
absolutely.
that."
You can't not. I mean, a lot of these people have given feedback. I think authors have said the same thing. They value the feedback. Because if you're writing in a sealed room, for writing or creating in a sealed room, it's a slightly strange, one-sided experience to hear feedback from people, even if it's just well done with that. I kind of make a point of that. It's all too easy. People say, well, you can sort of, particularly online or similarly, give negative feedback. I think giving a positive feedback, I really enjoyed that aspect. You nailed that. That's encouraging. That positive feedback is going to spur people on to do it. And as you say, and then you start suggesting things. Who knows where that's going to go? That is a good point. I suppose that's it's the double-edged sword, I suppose, of something like a fest, is that it covers a lot of bases. That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Larger scale covers everything. If your interest is one thing, you run a risk of being disappointed. Too strong a word? I don't know. You turn up, like you say, you turn up on the Sunday thinking, right, I'm love the heresy. I'm really looking forward to it. There's no one here from the writing team. Okay, I'll talk about my favourite sculpts. Well, that's not really my favourite part. But if you remain adaptable because you are into a bunch of different things, fantastic. Fest, you're going to suit you down to the ground. If you only play one system, not so much.
You know what I think would be lovely to see from GW, that what they've done is they said, we've got Fest. This is everything. This is our flagship. We've got the Heresy Weekender. We've got the Forge World Open Day, the Age of Sigmar Open Day, the Kill Team Open Day or Weekender, whatever that is. They've actually got a really broad range of events. What they've not yet done is put something that's a permanent resource that says, if you're a bit confused by all these things we're doing, what should you go to? What's the difference between a weekender and a fest and an open day? Here's something which explains it. So if you're only into the Horus Heresy, cool, come along to fest. But the thing you want to put in your diary is the Heresy Weekender. Do you know what I mean? Just manage expectations, because we've got this portfolio of amazing events, but we're not educating people on how to get the best out of it.
Does the Warhammer World website do that?
The Warhammer World website is terrible.
Well, they've moved to this new one now. I don't think much has changed, to be honest.
They're also not all at Warhammer World.
No,
that's true. That's true. That was the only place, though, I thought that has done something similar, where they set out like several months or a year in advance what they're doing, and they talk about those things,
which is useful.
Yes, exactly. It's the only place I think that's done it. It's the only platform that's done it.
I wonder if Games Workshop are in a position to tell you that information, Michael. Part of me wonders if they would get that right, because of the nature
that's
of wanting
a different question.
Yeah, I almost feel that at this moment in time, that would be better written by someone who's not part of Games Workshop. Because
that's certainly something that we could do, for example.
I was gonna say,
but it wouldn't.
Who hosts a podcast, perhaps.
But it doesn't have the same reach. However, they do have a group of professional copywriters in the community team, and an events page on the community wouldn't go amiss, where it explicitly says, we don't always know the dates, so keep checking back for the dates, but here's what you get out of each type of event.
I would, if they did that, which would be good, I would like them to ask people who attend to provide
testimonials.
Ask that question to people and pick your answers from those replies, because I could just see what Games Workshop say about this is what the Horus Heresy is all about, and me reading it and going, I don't go to the Horus Heresy Weekender for any of those reasons. Just because of the corporate head that they would have on themselves. But a testimonial style response would be better.
Yeah. Similarly, if you promise something and you don't deliver it, you've got a bit of a problem. And I suspect there are people out there who would be all too happy to point that out.
That's fairly basic copywriting stuff, though. It's not hard to say things which sound exciting without committing to too much. But I think, as you say, Greg, get some form of testimonial in there. Talk about abstract concepts rather than specifics. So rather than saying you will get this out of it, if you're looking for this sort of thing, the Heresy Weekender is a good idea.
Sure. Yeah, because
I mean, hey, like there are loads of us who know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I think it's for the purpose of someone who is new to the hobby.
Well,
and surely that's kind of what the community site is about.
It's not even people who are new to the hobby. The amount of times within the heresy community, the amount of times you hear podcasts say, "Oh, the weekend has gone on. I don't know why people turn up," and they literally don't understand why people would go to a place where you get news, which you can get online, and misunderstandings occur. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that is something they could potentially look at doing. And there's lots of little things. GW are getting much better at a lot of things, but you can always improve.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's a good point. I think that's what we're talking about here. I think you've said before, Greg, I've heard you mention it, that knowing further in advance so that people can make plans, particularly people going internationally, which there were there. I mean, that's obviously a relatively minor thing, but for me, it was seeing people turn up in cosplay, for example. People are putting in work to come to these things. They need to know these things in advance. Just what this last couple of weekends or whatever it was. I managed to screw up my own schedule and had to miss out on Games Expo because I booked some gig tickets, which I'd completely forgotten about. Missed out on that. I should have. That was ridiculous because that was known well in advance. So things happen, but you kind of don't get the chance with these things because a lot of these happen or are confirmed as dates, and tickets go on sale relatively close to the event. And I still think that's something they could pitch further out. They could pitch months in advance.
Yeah,
save the date. Certainly.
Yeah.
That's all it needs. It needs to save the date. You can't get tickets yet. Tickets are going to be available 6 weeks out, 8 weeks out, whatever it is. But mark your diary now. Yeah.
So, it ends up being 3-ish months usually. Certainly for the Heresy Weekender, certainly for Black Library Weekender last year, we got a little bit more info. But we just had the Black Library live. That would have been the perfect time to say, by the way, coming
was really my question is I don't know if there is
coming in November is this, To
be fair, last year at BL Live they did that. So in your goodie bag there was a flyer saying save the date, Black Library Weekender is happening at the Belfry over this weekend. This year the message was it's with the global events team. Information will be forthcoming, which felt a little bit like a Black Library going, hey, like, it's out of my hands.
Yeah, I don't
think that's for any company to do that. I don't put a lot of faith in that. I don't support that. I know people do it, and I know what people are like in different departments and things. But you're representing your company. You shouldn't ever just be handing it off like that, regardless of what the situation is.
I mean, bear in mind that I'm reading between the lines.
Yeah,
fair enough. Yes, of course.
So it wasn't quite as blatant as that, but it was. We're going off topic here, but BL have always run their own events in the past. It feels like those events are being taken and run by the events team, which
I think that's completely irrelevant because it's a question of what these events are like. Are they smaller scale affairs run by a smaller team, a smaller, more specific team, or is it a much larger celebration of everything, which is what Fest is? So it needs a much larger team organising it, and similar to run it on the professional level of a major event. I think it's got to be. That's the kind of expectation. I want Games Workshop to be the best at what they do. So I'm going to hold them to those standards, as I would hope they hold themselves to that standard. So similarly, I think like coverage, for example, coverage of this. Were Warhammer TV there?
It'd be Live or the Weekender?
Fest.
Yes, for part of it. I saw Wade wandering around. I saw someone walking around with a camera.
They had a
but
room,
only briefly.
They had
that
a room
feels like
where...
that can be turned up considerably.
Yes.
I mean, if you feel like we say, oh, well, you sort of think things being covered. People got a bit fidgety when Warhammer Community were covering preview seminars and content. Now it's sort of actually that's a positive thing. That's been kind of accepted and seen as a positive thing, I think, generally. I wonder if coverage needs to be similar, particularly if you start folding in kind of actual gaming events and competitive aspect events. I know there's quite a lot of moves being made in that area by independent parties, and fantastic. I can't wait. But I would have thought these sorts of events could accommodate that as well.
Well, when you consider that the BL Weekender 2018, I think. I mean, I got videotaped for that. Like I'm on a video somewhere. if they had to stoop to me, I mean,
but I mean, you love a spotlight, though. I mean, let's be honest.
Without a doubt. But they had 2 or 3 in the community coverage. They had 2 or 3 videos with authors and fans talking about what they were enjoying. That gives you a little bit of that testimonial. So the stuff we've been talking about here, like what we've got out of Fest, is arguably really valuable because it helps someone make a decision for next year of whether they want to go.
Yeah.
Now, GW had people roaming around, and they could totally have done talking heads. Hey, to spend 2 minutes, tell me what your favourite thing about today was, and then cut a little video of, cut that down to a load of different people, and it's 3 minutes, 4 minutes, something like that you put out later that day or on the Monday or something. That helps educate people as to what they can expect for the future year. It's a sales tool. It's going to encourage people to go again. I think you're right. I think coverage, they have the tools for it. Obviously, staffing, all those sort of things. We don't know if there are issues with that sort of stuff, but you feel like it would be an obvious step, or in fact, it almost feels like it's been a step backwards.
Yeah. So did Black Library Live? Did the Black Library team run that, or did the events team run that? Do you know, Michael?
I don't. No, I mean, there were loads of BL staff there, but there were also loads of GW staff.
Sure.
So I don't know.
What independent event, or not independent, what one-dayer events are there? I mean, the fact that we're asking ourselves this question, it just reinforces the need for that website. What ones are there? Because there's the BL Live, there's the Warhammer Open,
AOS
the Age
Open,
of Sigmar Day.
Yeah, AOS Open Day, 40k Open Day, Forge World Open Day.
New Year's Open Day,
Black Library Live.
There's a Kill Team. I think there was a day, and maybe last year there was a weekender.
Yeah,
yes, there was like a narrative event, wasn't it? But that's not quite the same as one of these open days, or maybe it was.
I think it was an open day and a tournament.
Well, it was. Yeah, it was a gaming event. I also feel so in the heresy community, the term weekenders being used by people who put on events, and I find it. I'm kind of against it in a really old man kind of way, but part of me is like, no, a weekender is very descriptive of 2 specific events that happen from Games Workshop. Like, to me, when you say weekender, that has connotations attached to it. And when they said Kill Team Weekender, and I was like, that's not a weekender. That's a very different thing.
What it did have a preview seminar as well as the gaming stuff. So I would, for us, trying to identify where the events are, what we're really saying is there's loads of tournaments, but any event which has a preview seminar is kind of how I would characterize these, because it's something where if they've got a preview seminar, they've got a studio element where you can go and talk to people and engage with Games Workshop.
To be fair, it had that, so
more than you do at a straight up tournament.
It's one of those weird things, though. I mean, it's a minor issue, really. I suppose it had half the elements of the weekender, but it wasn't on a separate venue, and it wasn't that kind of enclosed.
I was just thinking that, to me, is that I was just going to come to that point. I think that is the differentiator.
Yeah.
If they did, I've got to be careful now. I use the right term. If they use the weekenders, if they did those at Warhammer World, disaster. I think that would lose a huge amount of what it's about. Fest is exactly the same. If they moved to that, I'm sure there's logistical benefits in them holding it in their own venue. The open days, crack on.
And
absolutely suits that. You do those weekenders or a weekend-long event. I should just call it a 2-day event, or even a 3-day, whatever they turn it into. If they did that at their own place, I think the whole point of them being elsewhere and focused, and preferably places with accommodation on site, makes it hugely different. Different.
And that's,
it changes the dynamic.
It does. And a little bit of that is the fact that we go to, thankfully for the last 2 weekenders, I've now missed only 2 weekenders. I've been to every other weekender. And they are a very different beast, but to people outside, maybe they aren't. But it almost, I think terminology is something that some people put more importance on than others. And I'm one of the people who sometimes goes that kind of, terminology is really important.
Agree. I agree with that as part of identity.
Yeah.
I think if it has an identity, then and terminology is part of that.
It also,
then yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. Over a period of time, expectations will build up, and it can almost become a template. Then for GW, they can have a weekender, they can have an open weekend and an open day, or however you want to call it. They'll come up with some cool term for that weekend, which is at Warhammer World, which isn't that the atmosphere. Cool. If weekenders, as we know them, Heresy Weekender, Black Library Weekender, were at Warhammer World, it would be a very different thing. Would I go to them all? I don't know. But yeah, that expectation. But yeah, it's an interesting one. We're talking about the events team running Black Library Weekender. They ran WarhammerFest. They've been running a few events. Hasn't always gone smoothly. We had issues getting in. The queues were considerably long and part of that reason was stuff that was easily solvable, shall we say. I think there is an issue with we don't seem to be seeing the progress from the events team that you would hope.
I agree.
They keep making errors that you think they shouldn't be making, which is
I saw something a bit like that at BL Live.
Right.
I mean, it's a smaller scale event than most of them because it's a smaller group of people who are interested. Yeah. But still, the seminars started at 10. The doors opened at 9:30. I mean, the queue was not as long as I've seen it even at other BL events. But when I was sat down in the seminar room at 10 o'clock, and I'd been near the front of the queue, so I'd managed to go in, get some books, go back to the car, go get to the seminar room in half an hour. But people were still queuing. People were still coming in as the seminar started. I mean, that's basic stuff.
That can actually quite affect your takeaway of the day, your takeaway feeling of the day. Because if you're starting your day under stress, frankly, you're getting antsy, thinking, I need to be in there. That's starting. Let alone I need to be in there early because I need to get a ticket to attend that seminar. I mean, you sort of think, well, there's surely ways one could do that ahead of time. You could pre-register for things. Maybe that's too difficult. I don't know. But surely people will have access to a printer. People will have access to registering things ahead of time. It seems entirely, or just put it on your phone.
Yes, so
it seems easy.
Adepticon do everything. You can do everything through your phone app. They have lanyards as well. So
it is the technological solution to a lot of this stuff is expensive.
Yes, that's true.
And I do understand why they maybe don't do that. But for example, with the tickets for both Fest, I mean, BL Live, you had a quote unquote ticket. It was a little sticky label that you stuck on the back of your lanyard to say which seminars you were going to go to in the little smaller of the rooms. But both that and Fest, we didn't know in advance that was going to be a thing.
Yeah,
that's not hard. There are social media channels. Especially if you're buying your tickets through Eventbrite, BL Live was only available via Eventbrite. The purpose of a tool like Eventbrite, this is me talking because this is my industry, the purpose of that tool is that you then capture all of that customer data. I got a reminder email saying, don't forget, from the Black Library events team or something like that. So 2 days out, you have all of those customers' data. No one bought tickets anywhere else. Everyone who's coming has given their email address because you had to. So you push an email notification to them to say, as part of registration, make sure you've got your app with the little ticket on it, and we'll be asking you if you would like to attend one of the seminars in this particular room because it's a smaller room and we need to limit numbers. That's all you need to do because then people go in expecting it.
Yeah. Yeah,
there you go. Expectations managed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting over this year, I think, to see how the events team handle things going forwards. Personally, I think they over the last 2 years, really, like they've let the ball drop on too many things. Sometimes it's not been major things, but it's accumulation. Would like to see that improve a bit. Because as you're right, you walk into an event and everything goes smooth, you don't think about it. But you have issues getting into a venue, you start to get antsy, frustrated. Well, this better be worth it. Everything else, your view can change. If you have that one small thing which makes things really easy, then you're like, well, this is great. Cool, bring it on.
Do you remember we all, I think Howard, you were there. We all went to the open day in January, and it was a little bit chaotic. I remember talking to you, Greg. We'd been there half an hour, and it was just people everywhere. No, like weird queues. No one really knew what was going on. No one really knew where to go for things. And that opening half an hour was a little bit stressful. And certainly, I was thinking, I just want to go and sit down. I want to just give it an hour, let it calm down. And then I can go in and see the Ambot and all these things, and go and enjoy the bits and pieces. That opening half an hour either has the potential to ruin the whole event. Because if you're like, I'm just not enjoying this, I'm going to go. Some people might have done that.
It's surprising actually, because that doesn't occur to me that could have that kind of impact. But actually, if you feel you've missed out, the fear of missing out is strong, and if you feel you've missed out on something you were looking forward to, that can have an impact, I think, and a lasting one at that. It gives you a lasting impression of it. I mean, I'm sort of speaking quite enthusiastically. I thought at first it was a success, but it only wouldn't take much to say you missed out on it. And I mean, for example, minor thing. And I suspect this wasn't anything to do with any events team or anything. There was something. Oh yeah, there was something. The new Custodes flyer was available at the Forge World stand on the WarhammerFest. At no point in any program or anywhere did they make clear what was available. You had to ask. You had to say. And unfortunately, I mean, I went around a couple of times, but speaking to the staff there, at least one of the 2 or 3 people I spoke to said, I don't know what's new today. I'll have to go and ask. You think, well, first of all, I was kind of fair play to you. You may be new to this, but should someone not have thought through that at least the staff manning the Forge World store should have known what their new product was?
Yeah, well, you have a briefing, don't you? You have 20 minutes before the doors open. You have, here's a piece of paper with a list of everything new.
And that is the B answer. Surely have a poster or something that I could even understand it saying I can't get something produced to put in everyone's program or bag to tell you I can't commit to the printing schedule necessary to get it in the program to say we're going to have these Forge World models available. Fair dues. But have a poster, even just write it down. Just have something that says these ones are available. I mean, I would have drawn attention to the Custodes flyer to our friend, the Custodes player who was there, who had no idea. I found out afterwards it's available. I haven't mentioned it to him because I suspect he'll be cross. But you think, well, that's missed opportunities. And even I had a pang of regret coming away, thinking, oh, damn it, I could have picked that up there. Would have saved me the postage. I don't know if it's over the pricing thing, but whatever. You still feel you've missed out on something that you might have otherwise taken away. And that seems a shame.
And there is an argument of they don't always know that they're going to have enough stock to release something that they, don't give away a date if you're not 100% sure you can hit it. So don't print off hundreds or thousands of pieces of paper. Cool. You've got a website, Warhammer Community, where the Friday night you should know what you're selling the next day.
You must have to, surely. You can't have someone rocking up with a box of stuff saying, this is hot off the print. So hot out of the oven, we've got these new Forge World models.
A post can go up on the Friday saying, by the way, this is what's for sale tomorrow. And you know what? Someone goes, actually, I don't know. But if you go to Warhammer Community, you can find out.
Yeah.
So, there's those little things which
I thought
have the potential to feel big.
Was incredible. The number of staff they had there was good. So you could have had a member of staff walking up and down the queue or stood at the sort of entrance point of the queue saying, have you checked Warhammer Community? Yeah. They've got a list of what's on sale here. You haven't got your phone with you. Your phone's out of power. Here's a tablet. Yeah. You can have a look at what's here. Yeah. That would solve that issue.
To me, it all of these things feel like a basic lack of experience in the events team. So if you go and talk to theatres and art centres, they're all about all the different touch points that a customer or a visitor has throughout their experience. So the first thing is when you buy the ticket, all the way through to the last person you speak to. But the crucial ones are where you buy your ticket, the first interactions you have when you turn up at the door, and then the conversations with the sales staff, those sort of things. And if it feels to me like there isn't someone in that team who's worked front of house at a theatre or an arena or something like that, because if you've done that, then you know people are going to ask these questions. You know people are going to have these experiences, and you know the impact it can have. Imagine, Howard, if we'd seen that queue for the tickets for the seminars, and we were 100. Like the main reason we were going was to get into the Forge World seminar. You look at that, and we might have gone, well, we just have to queue. So you spend half an hour, maybe even an hour. I don't know how long. That queue was huge. Waiting. You get to the front, there's no tickets there. Like that's going to set the tone for our whole day, and the event as a whole then has to work twice as hard to impress us, to bring our appreciation for the event back up.
But
it would have been a shame for all the other elements of the event, because of the contrast stuff, all the enthusiasm of the staff, the fact that there were actually, if you're new to ask, some really cool things to buy. That was all brilliant. It just feels like it's let down or could potentially be let down by a lack of just nitty gritty, like detail-oriented preparation.
Well,
I think that's stuff they can sort out, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
I agree with you. I agree with all of this. It feels like it's stuff they can deal with, though. None of it is systematic. I mean, I think the way we've spoken positively about it really shows that. I mean, as you said, we barely even touched the contrast point.
So there's two things there. First off, we were lucky that actually we found out that we can do WarhammerFest differently than the way we normally do it, or the way we thought we had to do it. And part of that was because we walked up to that queue and I went, are you all queuing for seminar tickets, basically? And they went, yes. And I went, stuff that. Not happening. I walked away. We were lucky that actually it worked out for us that we don't mind doing it a different way. When you talk about these are all easy things to fix, you're quite right. I saw on, I think it was the Independent Characters Discord, someone was talking about, the queue to get in was up to an hour and a half for some people, which is poor. It's very poor. And I think it was Carl actually said, okay, something along the lines of, that's a shame, but, we need to kind of, whatever, move on. Not move on, but they'll deal with it, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, the problem is this has been a complaint at X number of events for the last few years. That queuing
and think about what
poor.
Caused that queue. At least part of it was the fact that they had a load of goodie bags that were disassembled. They hadn't filled in our little bit. I don't know if this was everyone, our little bit of the queue. They handed us a lanyard to put our ticket in, a tote bag, and then said, take one of everything. And so everyone was looking at this table full of stuff, thinking, like, what am I supposed to be picking up? And it creates an instant bottleneck.
Yeah, because you're going, do I want this? Do I not want this? What's the point?
And that is basic stuff. You have if you have goodie bags, if you have tote bags, they are prepared, because anything like that, where you've got a limited number of entrances and a large number of people, they will automatically be bottlenecks. So you want to speed it up as much as possible. Yeah,
and so we look at that one. We look at the Heresy Weekender when they had 2 sales areas, 1 queue, no one telling you to be in a different queue. You look at Heresy Weekender a few years ago when they're like, don't worry, everyone can have a book. There's 250 books here and you've sold 350 minimum tickets. Fine if that's the way it is, but don't tell us we can definitely guarantee getting one, that kind of thing. And then you look at another event where we had a similar issue and it's like, actually, how many times can queuing be an issue? And we'll forgive you, right? We'll forgive you when a till goes down, right? We'll forgive you when something happens that's out of your control. That's not a problem. People will forgive you. They're generally quite good. When it's the same similar issues occurring event after event, that starts to wear thin.
Agree.
But I don't want to finish on a bad note, because we all said right at the start of this. So I went, I did 2 days at a WarhammerFest a number of years ago, and I frankly, that second day I was really stretching it out, and I was only there for 2 days because my mates were playing in an event, so I couldn't leave. But next year, I am strongly considering even getting one of those gold tickets where you can just ignore queues and walk everywhere you want.
Yes,
if they do.
I'm slightly surprised I didn't know about those. I didn't see that publicised anywhere. Had I known, might have considered that differently ahead of time. I do now, having spoken to people at the event who had those. I would seriously consider that this year, and probably will come this year in 2020.
Do we know? Do we know exactly what they got you?
So they got you a goodie bag with more stuff in it. You got one of all the limited stuff, I believe.
Yes.
Like the lieutenant.
All that kind of thing. You got you basically got to walk into any seminar without queuing. You got to go anywhere without queuing, and various other a few little things like. It's not the most amazing thing in the world. It's not like the old platinum gold ticket for Black Library Weekend or anything like that. But it potentially is worthwhile if.
How much more was it?
It was quite a bit more, but when you added up what you got for it, if you were going to get those things anyway, it was excellent. It was genuinely excellent value. It was better. It was cheaper than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
However, if you weren't going to get those things. Clearly not necessarily as good value because it was more expensive. I forget what it actually was, something like 80 or 90 quid or something maybe a bit more.
Like that, yeah.
It was more than the sum. Obviously, it was more than the sum of 2 tickets, that's for sure. But you did get quite a bit of extra stuff, and as you say, you got the seminar tickets there and then. So people who were running blogs or stores or similar were getting those tickets to ensure they were in these various seminars to be able to report on them.
It will be interesting to see if they do that again. And I don't know how well it worked from their point of view. The other thing is, on the Friday night, they had the Warhammer Heroes dinner for the UK and maybe the European people who won those. And Ben Curry was at the venue and was walking around a little bit on Saturday because he'd got his Warhammer Heroes thing. And it turns out that the Warhammer Heroes badge works similar. He walked past the queue on the way in, was like, yeah, stuff that, flashed his badge and got let places. So next year, if people want to vote for me for being a Warhammer hero, just for that perk would be quite useful.
Consider it done.
Yeah, thank you very much. But yeah, I'd say at the end of the day, we had issues with it, and we've discussed them. And I've always said with all the podcasts, I will be honest. With my opinions.
Similarly, those issues are always put forward with a view to making them better.
Yeah,
they want feedback. It's pointless us sitting here saying, it was all spectacular, because nothing ever can be. It would be ridiculous. There's always going to be somewhere I would always strive to try and think of ideas to try and make it better.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be overly pointlessly kind of bland and over the top about it. So trying to find those things is entirely in the context of saying, it was as I started, is a great event. Yeah. I will go for a longer period of time than I have to any previous fest. I'd say that's a sign of success.
Yeah, that's the litmus test, isn't
always places to go.
That's the litmus test is, would I go again? Yes. And actually, we've all expressed a possible option of going for 2 days next year rather than 1. So, overall, that's your answer to WarhammerFest. Anything final you wanted to add there, Michael?
The 20-30 minutes that Howard and I spent side by side painting with contrast was an absolute delight, and was a real highlight for me. I think part of why I enjoyed it so much was that contrast blew my mind and appeals to me massively because I'm a very slow painter, and the chance to get hands on with something brand new and not just like playing a game with some models I've seen before. Literally hands-on with something that I has never seen before was an amazing experience. I loved that.
Awesome. I think I would agree with that entirely. I would say there's almost a giddy-like feeling of being there and having not done a hobby-based thing at one of these events before, and being able to sit there and paint in an experimental way, sort of exchanging ideas as we're doing it, was transformative, actually, I would say, in terms of an experience at an event, having been to many over many years now. And you think this is a new thing. So I suppose the takeaway there is try as many new things as you can. And where better than fests to do that?
To get the most out of these events, you've got to participate. You can observe, but participation brings out a lot more of this event. I think that will do. I think we'll leave it there. I had a different idea of how this discussion was going to go, but I think it went the right way. So
that's good news.
Which is good. Thank you very much, Michael and Howard, for coming on.
A pleasure.
Thank you for having us, Greg. As always, a pleasure to chat through things.